Hello and welcome to Wingin It. In this video today we're going to be taking a look at some starting hand strategy and early game decision making. I'm going to be talking through some of my tips and tricks to pick the best starting hand you can, and then we're going to be delving into some starting hand scenario situations and putting those tips into practice. Now this is something I have done before. I've done a few different videos in the past looking at early game strategy and starting hand situations. But it's not something I've done since the release of the Oceania expansion. And of course, with the launch of this expansion, there are more options in the early game, more decisions to be made, and potentially some new strategies to be looked at in these starting hand situations. So I thought this was well worth a revisit here, and hopefully I can share with you some tips so that you can help pick the best possible starting hand in your next game of Wingspan Oceania. Now, the first thing to point out, of course, in the Wingspan Oceania starting hand decision making is that you get yourself a free Nectar at the start of the game, and that can definitely make for some interesting decisions in the starting hands. Of course, we're very much used to in the Wingspan base game and European expansion having that choice at the start. You've got to keep either 5 birds or food, and you have to keep different types of food. So playing something like this American oyster catcher is going to be a little bit more difficult before Wingspan Oceania comes out, because you need 2 worms there. So getting that second worm can maybe take a little bit of time, or maybe you need to overpay. But here, much more easier now with this starting Nectar that you're always going to get. You could be able to play a bird like this very easily, and that can definitely open up some more options for you in those early game and starting hand decisions. Of course, another option available to you with that starting Nectar is the ability to grab 2 cards at once. So again, this is a very new decision that we have here. Courtesy of the Oceania boards, these new boards that come with the Oceania expansion. On the base boards, you only get that 1 card if you want to draw cards on that first turn. Maybe there's 2 good cards in the tray you want to go and draw. You can only go and pick one of them up. But now we have this ability here, spend that Nectar. You can go and grab 2 cards from the tray in that single turn right at the start. And that could really help you get off to a quick start, picking up 2 birds like that so early on in the game. Another option you sometimes have in your starting hand decision, and your first turn in particular, is the ability to grab 2 Nectar from the bird feeder. So as we can see in this situation here, going first, 2 Nectar in the bird feeder. So as with that option of being able to draw 2 cards discarding the Nectar, we can now on our first turn, without having any birds down, draw 2 food by discarding a card. So sometimes it's going to pay off in these situations to be able to keep an extra card just with the intention of throwing it away, and go and grab 2 Nectar in that first turn. And that is 2 extra Nectar for you to be able to spend on a bird, but it is also 2 Nectar that you have denied from your opponent. So I think especially in 1v1 games like this, having that option, having that ability, if maybe you're not too interested in the cards in the tray, and you just need that little bit of extra food to be able to get some of those high food cost birds down, being able to go and grab 2 Nectar, it can really help accelerate your early game and help with the Nectar scoring. Of course, spent Nectar, it is going to count for points at the end of the game, and being able to get that leg up on your opponent early on in one of the habitats, that could be very key, but being able to score those points later on in the game. One key consideration that is definitely worth making in your starting hand decisions is thinking about where your eggs are going to come from. So of course, taking a look here at the new Oceania boards, with the weakened grasslands, getting access to eggs is a lot more difficult. You're going to need that first grassland bird down to start getting 2 eggs, otherwise you're only getting 1, and you have to discard either a card or a food to get a second egg, and that can really slow you down in that early game. So one option is to keep even a subpar grassland bird just to be able to get that down and start laying eggs. But of course, another option is to be able to find birds that can go in other habitats and get egg access there. So for example here, we have this red-winged blackbird. We can play this down in the wetlands. That is going to help not only start our wetlands habitat in order to help us get some points through the tucking power, but of course get hold of some eggs. So while in the base game and European expansion, the focus was very much in the early game on being able to get access to cards and food, I think eggs are just as important, and maybe in some situations even more important to be considering in the early game here in Oceania, because they are so much harder to get hold of in the grasslands. So those are a few tips and things to think about some considerations to make when going into your next Wingspan Oceania starting hand scenario. And with those tips in our back pocket, we are going to now jump into some starting hand scenarios, and I'm going to talk through what I would be doing in each of these situations. But as well as that, I want to hear from you guys. For each of these, what would you be doing? Would you be doing the same as me? Would you be doing something slightly different? I think all starting hand scenarios have many, many different ways of approaching them, and it is always interesting to hear how people would approach things differently. So let me know down in the comments how you would approach each of these. But for now, let's jump here into a starting hand scenario. So we are going to be going first in this one, and let's see what decisions we have to make in this starting hand. We have got some very, very nice options indeed to look at. So common grackle, that is definitely going to help us out in the wetlands. As I talked about in those tips with something like the blackbird, it's the same power here. Being able to get your egg source in that wetlands is going to be very, very nice. But equally, having this peaceful dove as an option in the forest of also getting eggs. This is a very, very nice bird. Being able to discard as many seeds as you like and then lay an egg on the dove for each of those. So that is definitely a very, very tempting option. And of course, as with any starting hand situation, we're going to be taking a look at the feeder and bearing in mind the food that is there. Plenty of nectar, but plenty of seeds as well, potentially to give us some options for a peaceful dove. So we'll take a look at the tray as well. And with a bird like the yellowhammer in the tray, that is definitely going to tempt me going first. So I'm a big fan of this bird. I think it's a really, really strong power, that teal power. Of course, if you use all 4 different types of actions in a round, you get to play another bird. And I feel like even more so on the Oceania boards, you find yourself taking all of the actions. Of course, with the strengthened wetlands and the strengthened forest, you might not be taking each of those actions as often, but you are still going to be taking them. And of course, in the grasslands, you're going to need eggs to be able to play birds as well. So I find that I can pretty easily trigger those kind of teal powers and be able to get additional birds down. So yeah, of course, going first here, the tray is always going to be in my consideration, and I'm going to be using that information to try and help me decide which of the birds I'm going to keep and maybe which food as well. So we, of course, take a look at the starting hand, and with something like Ethologist, that feels like pretty much a no-brainer. Very, very solid bonus card, of course, from the European expansion. Guaranteed 2 points, just got to play a bird and you get 2 points. And every different power colour you play in a certain habitat, you get another 2 points. And of course, now with the Oceania expansion, we have a new power colour. We've got these new yellow powers, so that can definitely help here with something like the Ethologist, being able to get even more points there. And yeah, I think up against something like Wetland Data Analyst, this is a very, very tricky bonus card to work with. Very, very specific use case, and can be quite distracting, I find, to try and score points from that. So I think, as I say, Ethologist should be a pretty easy keep. The only decision is going to be what food do we keep to work with these birds. So I'm not especially interested in the rest of these. I think the short-toed tree creeper has potential, and there is maybe a way of making it work in this scenario, but I find that eggs, normally you don't have that many extra eggs on the base boards. This is a great bird. On the Oceania boards, where eggs are a bit more scarce, not quite so strong, so probably not something I look at here. And I think if you are going to go with the yellowhammer, which I think in this situation I will be doing, it always pays to keep that little bit more food. I find that that's normally the limiting factor in a yellowhammer situation is having the food, especially with something like Peaceful Dove, where maybe we're going to be discarding some food. We might not have loads of it around to be able to play some additional birds. So yeah, I'm thinking, of course, keep the grackle and the dove, and then it's probably just keep 3 food like this. So we can pick up the yellowhammer, we can play the Peaceful Dove, we could choose if we want to use a nectar, maybe we want to use a seed. I think it's going to go in this forest, and yeah, we start getting food. We can grab the nectar, we can grab the seeds. Of course, being able to get eggs there is going to be handy, but we've also got this common grackle. I think that would be going down in the wetlands very quickly. Just help the send a round goal as well. And start drawing. We're going to need something else to play with the yellowhammer at the end of the round. But yeah, 8 turns in this round I think is plenty of time to be able to get the grackle, the dove, and that yellowhammer down as well. See what else the grackle finds, see what food you can get hold of. This feels like a pretty strong opening hand, and I'm sure this would be a very, very fun game to play. Moving on here, we have another game and another starting hand to consider. We're going second this time let's jump in and see what we've got. And okay, we have got, again, some good options here, mostly for the forest, but definitely some strategy options to be considering. So the Eurasian nuthatch, I really like that as an opening forest bird. Definitely strong. Definitely a good way of just building out that forest, start getting some more food. Of course, getting the caches here as well that you can use to play additional birds later on if you so desire. So that is definitely a strong one to consider. To be honest, Eurasian nutcracker can pair very nicely with that as well. Go for a strong forest, get lots of caches with that additional food that you get early on in the forest. Can be a good option here on the Oceania boards. Of course, we're going to take a look at the opening tray as well, and not too many strong well-end options there, but something like Australian Raven does definitely work well with a forest engine approach. Already 7 points, big point bird, but that yellow power, being able to cache additional food, any food left over at the end of the game, you can score points from that. So definitely a strong option to be considering. Of course, we'll look at the starting hand as well, and Forester and Omnivore. Okay, two very nice bonus cards. Forester definitely works well here with this sort of caching approach, but Omnivore is equally a very, very strong bonus card, especially with something like the Australian Raven in the tray. That could definitely be a strong option to consider. So yeah, difficult decisions here in terms of do you commit to the full cache? Of course, with this starting Nectar, makes it a lot easier to get down. So ordinarily, if this was on the base game or European expansion, playing the Nuthatch and the Nutcracker, you wouldn't be able to do those before gaining food because you need 2 seeds. But now, very easily keep a worm and a seed for the Nuthatch, use a Nectar on the Nutcracker, get them both down before you start taking food and scoring lots of points. So Nightingale here could equally be an option. It is a good way of guaranteeing yourself some extra seeds. So maybe go a little bit crazy and put that in the forest as well, and get a really strong activation in the forest. Just get loads and loads of seeds. That could definitely be a fun approach in this game. I'm certainly not massively interested in these other two. Maybe the American Goldfinch could be a way of again getting more seeds if that's the way we want to go in this game. And I'm sure again that would be a fun way of playing. Australian Zebrafinch is maybe not too strong of a bird. I think that's quite a difficult one to work with, although if we are giving out seeds of the Nightingale, could be potentially an option. But yeah, I think I would look at keeping these 3 birds in this situation. Definitely an unusual starting hand. Omnivore has to be the one as well. And yeah, Australian Raven. I know we're going second here, but I think that's unlikely to get picked up turn 1. So I'd be looking at going for that. And yeah, if you can get yourself a strong caching setup here, going in the forest, this could turn out to be a very fun game and a very high scoring one at that. One final starting hand situation for this video today. We're going to jump into this one. Going first, let's see what we have got to start with. We've got some very familiar faces here. Australian Raven popping up once again. But we do have, again, some strong forest options here in the Great Crested Flycatcher and the Blue-Grey Gnatcatcher. So very familiar birds if you played a lot of base game Wingspan. Yeah, these should need no introduction. Both very good at gaining food. Maybe slightly weaker here in the Oceania expansion, however. Nectar is the way to go. Of course, we look at the feeder. There's already a couple of Nectar there. Lots of worms as well. That might make this Flycatcher an interesting option. But I do feel like these kinds of birds that get specific kinds of food that aren't Nectar are definitely a bit weaker here in Oceania. You want to get as much Nectar as you can. You want to be able to spend Nectar, of course, helping scoring points at the end of the game. And just help with the flexibility of being able to use it as any food cost as well when playing birds can definitely be strong. We're going to take a look at the tray as well, and we have got some good options here in the tray. Tree Swallow, again from the base game, should need no introduction. A very, very nice power, being able to tuck and draw, score points, cycle through the deck a little bit more quickly. But that White-Faced Heron as well is a very, very strong power, being able to reset the feeder and potentially cache all the fish that come up. So that can get you a lot of points, and it's already a big point bird in its own right. So we will take a look at our bonus card as well. Maybe that makes a difference in terms of what we want to go with. Food Web Expert does make me lean more towards this Blue-Grey Gnatcatcher, already getting a couple more points there. And we've already talked about this Wetland Data Analyst. I think that is just too tricky of a bonus card to be working with. Very, very low point return for even 3 birds. And trying to get 5 birds with consecutive ascending or descending wingspans. Best of luck with that. But Food Web Expert should be, yeah, some safe points at the very least if we do go with this gnatcatcher. So, yeah, I think this could well be a situation here in going first here where we do discard the Nectar and we pick up the Tree Swallow and the Heron. I think those are both excellent options. I would probably lead away from this Flycatcher and go more towards the Gnatcatcher. Of course, the security of gaining from the supply rather than the bird feeder, you get that guaranteed food coming through and the 2 extra points from the Food Web Expert. And I'd probably look more to some of these big point birds. The Raven is going to be amazing. We should be able to get some extra food. Maybe if we do keep this Flycatcher as well, we could go for a strong forest. But for sure, I think this is a no-brainer keep. And likewise, the Woodcock, I think, if you get these big point birds in your starting hand, especially when you've got a brown power that's going to secure you food, I think it is worth spending, that extra resource at the start on being able to keep an extra card rather than extra food. I think food here, hopefully, should not really be too much of a problem. So, to be honest, I think you could get away with the Flycatcher here as well. You can keep the 1 worm. Of course, as I said, if we're planning on discarding the Nectar, pick up those 2 cards, we're still left with the 1 worm. We can play the Gnatcatcher, start taking food, hopefully get our hands on those 2 Nectars. And maybe look at getting things set up here. Filled columns round 1. We can play the Raven or the Woodcock in the grasslands if we so choose for that. So, yeah, this might be one of those starting hands where it takes a little bit of time to get things set up, get birds down, but with such strong birds here, big point birds, and of course, if we're going for those 2 birds in the tray, some very, very strong powers to get down in the wetlands as well. I think this could turn into a very, very strong board with these very nice options here in this starting hand. So there we go. Those were a few starting hand scenarios. Hopefully you found those useful. And as I said at the start, do let me know in the comments, would you have done something different there in each of those scenarios? Was there something I missed? Was there maybe a different strategy that we could have gone with? Definitely do let me know your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, hopefully you found this tips useful. And as I said at the start, with these Oceania starting hands, there's definitely different options to be considering, whether it's being able to pick up those 2 cards in the tray, whether it's actually keeping an extra card just to throw it and get some more Nectar. Definitely some interesting decisions to be made at the start. Definitely some new strategies to explore. So if you're new here, I do have plenty of strategy content. I've got plenty of gameplay as well. So please do stick around, do subscribe if you haven't, and do go and check out all of that other content. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in another video very, very soon.